Whether you're 4-0, 0-4, or somewhere in between, you're probably looking to make that trade to put you over the top in your league. Welcome to the Pretend GM Fantasy Football Show. It's episode 3. I am Alfredo Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at the Pretend GM. And as always, I am joined by Vig Nash Doraswamy. You can follow him on Twitter at Dr. Vig. Today, Vig, we're talking about trade targets that a lot of fantasy managers really should just be looking at to potentially win their leagues. We're going to go through like our normal stuff, the macro data refinement. We're going to take a look at the injuries, but this is a lot of this is going to be about trades. Okay. And so a trade target for a lot of fantasy managers over the first 3 weeks of the season has been Kyle Pitts. All right. With Kyle Pitts, he has been such a weird player to just even vouch for. Like, would you say?
Oh my God. I mean, the talent is there. Everybody loves him. We know he's fantastic, but you'll tell us more about it. But look, Arthur Smith, I don't know what's happening in Atlanta, and it is really hard to make a strong case for him sometimes.
It's so frustrating because like he's good. He's really good at football and he's super talented. And then you've got Arthur Smith with his thumb up his butt, who's just like, I don't know how to use football players on this team, but okay, go and run like half of the plays. It's honestly, it's just ridiculous. So I went on Twitter because Twitter is never, ever, ever wrong. And I ran a poll and I just asked a very open-ended, vague question. How many of you would actually trade for Kyle Pitts? Regardless of cost, Vig. I didn't say, trading a starter for any, just how many of you would even just trade for him? 55% of people, the majority of people said, no, I don't even want Kyle Pitts because people don't even want to deal with the headache. You know that Kyle Pitts has 3 games with less than 3 receptions right now? Like it's so annoying. It's so weird. There's a tweet from Dwayne McFarland, who's awesome over at Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. Follow him on Twitter. Arthur Smith hates Kyle Pitts, is what he says, and your fantasy team. The route participation this season: week 1, 72%, week 2, 91%, week 3, 68%, week 4, we saw a season low of 60%. Kyle Pitts is just not being used. And to give you some context on that, historically, you want your tight ends to be at 80% or higher to give you great production. 70% is decent, but to be at 60%, that's really bad. It's really bad. And I think the only shining light, and this is what Dwayne said even as well, is that he at least had a 24% target share. 24% of the garbage that Marcus Mariota's throwing out there is not super helpful. So like I don't even think you can sell him. And I think that's what that Twitter poll shows.
Yeah. And what makes it really, really hard is that, we were talking about like Allen Robinson last year not being Matt Nagy proof. Like you could give Allen Robinson horrible quarterbacks and he was still doing great. I just don't know if like Kyle Pitts has any viable path to production in an offense that won't use him. I mean, in post-game interviews, Arthur Smith says, I'm trying to win real football games, not fantasy football games. And but
he's not doing good at that either.
We don't know football as well as Arthur Smith. Clearly, Alfredo, we don't. But
clearly,
how do you expect to not win if you don't use one of your most talented players? I mean, this is a guy you guys picked up at like the highest areas of round 1. Anyway, Parker Hesse is playing more snaps than Kyle Pitts. Taysom Hill has more fantasy points per game. Will Dissly out in Seattle has more fantasy points. And Marcus Mariota's just not really good. 7 turnovers on the season. Mariota threw a pick yesterday, and Arthur Smith is like, you know what? I'm just going to run the ball 14 straight times. Not giving it to Drake London, not giving it to Kyle Pitts, these elite players. It's just, I don't understand. This is really frustrating.
Vic, has there been a bigger bust or disappointment in fantasy football this year than Kyle Pitts? And it's annoying because it's not even his fault.
Yeah. I really think at this moment, 4 games in, I think that he is the biggest bust, regardless of whether or not it's his fault. But if you're looking at players who like just aren't in control of their situation, it just makes it even more frustrating.
So you know what? I'm going to use this analogy right here, Vig. I don't know if you could see this. Okay. Kyle Pitts, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm holding this up. Kyle Pitts is this monstrosity of a coffee. So I'll go out to get coffee this morning, and I'm pretty basic. I get my vanilla latte, and sometimes I'll do the sugar-free one because I'm a psychopath. But I got my skinny vanilla latte, venti, because I need a lot of caffeine. And I get in the car after, going through, not get in the car, but I go through the drive-through and I start coming back home, and I start to turn back into my neighborhood, and I take that first sip, and I'm like, This is not correct. And the lovely people over at Starbucks gave me a venti chai tea latte. And that's what Kyle Pitts is right now. Kyle Pitts is a chai tea latte when you didn't want that. You went to Starbucks hoping to get the proper order, and you got stuck with a stupid chai tea latte, which, by the way, I hate it. And if anyone drinks chai tea lattes, you're just weird.
And further, I just have to say this. No one listening to a fantasy football show wants to know, but chai is really the Hindi word for tea. Chai tea latte just means tea latte, which is what is that? Is that a coffee
So
with like
it's
two
just-
flavorings of tea? I don't know what that is, but yeah.
So it's just a double tea flavoring into bad. Like, no wonder it sucks. Like, I don't like it. So Kyle Pitts is the chai tea latte right now of fantasy football. Vegas. So let's play a game here. Okay, I'm gonna compare Kyle Pitts and the points per game fantasy wise to some other tight ends that are, well, they should have been the chai tea lattes. Okay, and you tell me who you think has more fantasy points per game. Okay, you ready?
I have no idea who you're going to tell me, and I'm just going to guess Kyle Pitts is lower than all of them. But yeah, go ahead.
Yes, no, you win. You win a chai tea latte. Yes. So Daniel Bellinger, Foster Moreau, Ross Dwelly, Colby Parkinson, Jeff Swaim. All of these players have played at least 2 games in the season, and they all have more fantasy points than Kyle Pitts.
They all do. Wow.
It's just getting to a point where it's stupid.
Oh my God. I mean, so this is like, I guess this is the absolute lowest price in a redraft league that you could probably get Kyle Pitts anywhere. And I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm not even sure I want him.
No, he's the chai tea latte. Like, that's it. Kyle Pitts, chai tea latte. You don't even want him anymore at this point. Getting into the rest of the show here, we're going to be going into our rehab roundup. We're going to do our macro data refinement, looking at some of the numbers and asking if these are players you should even be trading for. But before we get into all that, go ahead and smash that like and subscribe button here on YouTube. If you have like a phone or a touchscreen, don't smash too hard. Like just be normal and click it. If you have a question for week 5, start sit, waivers, anything like that, go ahead and ask in the comments below, and I will get back to them personally. Vig also jumps on there, and you know, he takes time from seeing patience and being smart to like answer questions and be like, hey, what's up? I'm Vig here in the comments. We also have an audio version of this podcast that you can listen to in the car or like in your house or whatever, because nobody drives to work anymore. So you can just listen to it wherever you want and leave a 5-star rating and review. And it helps us out a lot. And it makes Joe Bryant think that I'm like actually good at my job. So Vig, without any further ado, let's get to the rehab roundup.
All right. I was waiting for you to do that really weird voice, but since you're not, I don't want to spend too much time on this.
You mean this voice right here?
Oh my God. Why did I even
Hot
bring that
damn,
up?
we got the rehab roundup, boy.
All right.
Let's go.
All right. We'll be a little quicker through these. We were hoping that by recording Monday morning, we would get a ton more actionable info, but turns out they probably don't do MRIs until like later Monday. So, but we will run through some of the major fantasy relevant injuries, plus Daniel Jones. I don't know why he might not be fantasy relevant, but we're going to talk about him anyway. So we'll start with Jonathan Taylor. Most people's like 101 or 102 who has not been performing at that level. He came out with what looks like a high ankle sprain. As of this morning, it looks like what we were able to see from Pro Football Network, his imaging is done. He has avoided anything serious. But honestly, the next game's Thursday. Jonathan Taylor is almost certainly not going to play this Thursday. So think about what you're doing with the Colts. But we'll have to watch and see. They told us it's not serious. Do they mean it's just not a fracture? We don't know yet, but it looks like at least a high ankle sprain. So look for him to miss Thursday, possibly a few weeks coming after. The next one is Javonte Williams, our favorite Denver Bronco running back who just
lots
never
of
gets
horses
the work that we
here
want him to
on
get.
the rehab roundup. You got a Colt, you got a Bronco. Sometimes you just got to take care of them horses.
Oh man, no one wants to hear that. It was not funny at all, and the voice sucks. But
you laughed.
Javonte's injury looked a little serious. You know, it could be a bad knee injury. We don't like to speculate. This guy's livelihood. These guys love to play, but it looked like, and the way he came out, that it could be one of those dreaded ligament ACL kind of tears or a meniscus tear. And he may be looking to miss extended periods of time. Almost certainly we'll have an MRI today. Don't panic. Wait for the news. Maybe by the time you listen to this podcast on Monday night or Tuesday morning, we'll have more information. But for now, cautious, but it doesn't look pretty. Next, we'll go to Isaiah McKenzie, who's on the Bills. Do you have a Bills roundup joke too, or can I just keep going?
Buffaloes. That's all I got for you.
All right, excellent. I guess Cowboys deal with buffaloes up north.
Buffaloes, horses, other livestock. Yeehaw.
Isaiah McKenzie hurt his head. He's got a concussion. With increased scrutiny with what's going on with the concussion protocol and return to play protocols, we'll have to see what happens. We know a lot of folks have come back just fine. But we'll see. And the reason we talk about this is the other injury we have is Jamison Crowder, who was carted off in an air cast and has some sort of leg injury. Banged up Bills. One of the injury folks who talks about what's going on with the Bills on Twitter are saying that he had a high ankle sprain. So McKenzie out and Crowder out. We can talk about Khalil Shakir later, but he was in for a little bit. He caught his first NFL catch of the season, life, career, year, whatever you want to call it, and even was returning kicks. So maybe some fantasy stuff there. But yeah, Crowder
Did you say
like
banged up Bill?
Banged up Bills is the
banged up
Twitter
Bill. I
account that
knew
talks
banged
about
up
this.
Bill.
You gotta stop, Alfredo. Up next for our last two players, we are going to go into Justice Hill.
Justice Hill and banged up Bill. Hot damn. That's a combo right there.
Non-contact injury. Everyone, obviously, you see these non-contact, you see him pull up as they run. You think it's an Achilles. Looks like it's just a hamstring, soft tissue thing. Probably will be back. But again, we might have to wait and see. J.K. Dobbins has been doing pretty darn well from a fantasy standpoint overall. So we'll have to see what happens. And last but certainly not least, just because we like to make fun of the Giants, is Daniel Jones hurt his ankle. They're saying he's day-to-day, but this weekend they got a trip to London. Tyrod Taylor got a concussion. Like, who knows? I mean, you may be starting Davis Webb in Superflex or redraft leagues at this point if they elevate him from the practice squad. So really, just for Superflex folks, looks like Taylor's concussed and Daniel Jones hurt his ankle. Hey, man, it's Superflex. Sometimes you don't have anybody else.
Don't start Davis Webb, y'all. Don't do it. No way.
But that was a quick run through of the rehab roundup. And I just mostly went this quick because that way Alfredo stops his horrible rehab roundup voice.
I still get to do the voice whenever I want. It's my show.
Macro data refinement.
Macro data refinement.
Macro data refinement. Macro data refinement.
Macro data refinement.
Macro data refinement.
All right, let's get into our macro data refinement here. Vig, we're talking about players that I took a look at the most traded players on Yahoo Leagues, and we're going to take a look at the data surrounding these players, ask ourselves how it makes us feel, right? And understand, are we going to buy, sell, or hold these players based on the data that we have so far? It's been 4 weeks of NFL football. So like at some point, like we're starting to understand the picture on these players, and a very confusing situation has been running backs in Jacksonville, and it's James Robinson and Travis Etienne. I was on record on the Footballguys YouTube channel for my video of the week, putting Travis Etienne out there as my sleeper start of the week, going up against the Eagles, who are allowing receptions, and Travis Etienne, who was leading all running backs in yards per reception. And, he was on that precipice of just breaking out, and it didn't happen. And like I tweeted out, like the usage suggests that Travis Etienne is going to be used more, but then the actual usage suggests that he is not getting used. Like it just doesn't make sense. It's so annoying. Etienne outsnapped James Robinson in week 4, 24-21. Robinson only handled 47% of the snaps and 42% of the rushing work. So things are going down for him. And I think the weird wrench for the Jaguars this week was no Zay Jones. Zay Jones was out. They moved Christian Kirk from the slot to the outside, and then put Jamal Agnew in there, who just threw a wrench into everything. Jamal Agnew looked like how he did last year, just catching all these little short passes. He caught a couple touchdowns. It's a really weird game against the Eagles. Vig, they got some upcoming games against Houston, Indy, and the New York Giants. So some beatable games there, and some games where I think it'll be it could lend to more positive game script and more James Robinson and less Travis Etienne. So Vig, you're our resident Jags fan. Where are you at with Robinson and Etienne?
Again, like you said, man, it's just really, really hard to say. If you're rostering one or both of these guys, it is nearly impossible to predict the kind of output you'll get. I'm glad as a fan to have both of them, but as a fantasy manager, it's really frustrating and really challenging. And any given week that you're trying to start them, I mean, this week was like a really ugly, rainy game. You imagine there's going to be a lot of check downs and dump offs to the running back. And I agree. I thought Travis Etienne was going to be a great call this week, but
it's going to be the week. Right. It's going to be the week that none of us expected. It's going to be the week that we've all given up on him, and he's been dropped in a bunch of leagues, or he's been on the bench, and that's the week that he's going to go off for like 30 points, get 2 touchdowns and like 8 receptions, and then everyone's going to start him the next week, and he's going to just totally fall flat.
Exactly. That's exactly 1,000% how fantasy football works. We're not even making that up because it just honestly this entire season has felt like that.
And another guy that I think that a lot of people, this could be the lowest that his value is at, and it's Alvin Kamara. Nearly 60% of people, I ran the same poll on Twitter, and as we know, Twitter's never wrong. Nearly 60% of people said that they would not trade for Alvin Kamara, Vig, regardless of the price. And I think that this is where we talk about that psychology of fantasy football. I think there's a lot of people that are really just upset when players get injured. human beings that are playing fantasy football, just they don't separate their emotions from the logic. And players being injured, missing games, for example, being that late scratch early morning before the London game, you had him in your lineup. Like this happened to a lot of people, and I'm sure there's gonna be so many people that are just so bitter at that. They are done with him. They're done with Alvin Kamara, and it's showing. It's showing when you go to social media and you start asking these simple questions. And listen, Mark Ingram looked really bad for the Saints. Latavius Murray looked solid.
Okay.
Vig, unless you tell me like differently, should we be worried about this lingering rib injury, or is this one of those things that it's just as the pain gets better, he'll be fine?
Yeah, I think he'll be just fine. I mean, Alvin Kamara, he's been an absolute workhorse. He's been injured, played through injuries. When he's healthy, he gives you great production. When he's not so healthy, he still gives you better production than most and still gives you RB1 kind of production. I'm not very worried. There's nothing to suggest that he's not going to be back and doing well for redraft. Yes, he's on the older side, so when we talk dynasty stuff, maybe we can talk about trades in a different standpoint. But right now, when 60% of people are saying they would not trade for Alvin Kamara, that's when I would go and get Alvin Kamara.
And the thing, he's got really good matchups coming up too. Like he plays Seattle Seahawks, who were just torched by Jamal Williams, Cincinnati Bengals, Arizona Cardinals, Las Vegas Raiders, Baltimore Ravens, and Pittsburgh Steelers. All really good matchups in terms of fantasy running back production. I am all in on buying Alvin Kamara. I think that this probably should have been later in the show as one of the guys that we think that could win you your championship. And I really want to put my stamp on this outside of injury, right? But I think that if Alvin Kamara is there, he should be providing you top 10 running back value each week. And I think that right now you can trade for him at the cost of maybe like a top 24 running back because people are just so frustrated by it. So our next player here is another one that like fans are just like, they don't like him for some reason. And it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. 60% of people said they would not trade for Clyde Edwards-Helaire regardless of price. And I ran that poll before last night's game. So of course, then he goes off and just keeps producing. And people hate Clyde Edwards. Like they hate Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And I don't know of anything else like a player or like a show or a movie or just like a thing in general that everyone hates so much unanimously, like as a society.
Game of Thrones season 8.
Yes, there you go. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is season 8 of Game of Thrones. Like everyone just hates it. And then there's like 2 or 3 people in there. They're like, yeah, you know what? It's not bad. It's not bad. It gets the job done. Right? Like that's what we wanted, huh? Like that's what Clyde Edwards-Helaire is at this point. And I don't hate him. I don't. And like, I feel weird saying it. I feel dirty. I feel kind of stupid. And I'm probably going to get some flack in the comments, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's just always in a position to score. The Chiefs are a really good team. He saw a season high in snap share percentage last night here in week 4 and 21 opportunities in a Patrick Mahomes led offense. And I think it always comes back to that. Like, and he's actually running well. Like if this was just if this is just like he's getting fluky touchdowns like he did in week 3, then I get it. But it's just he's actually running well. I think he's averaging something like 7 yards a carry running the ball. And I know he's not running it like a ton, but man, he's getting used in the passing game. He's running the ball well. He's getting touchdown opportunities. Honestly, if you have someone that thinks they're selling high on Clyde Edwards-Helaire because it's overly efficient, like I'm actually fine. This is one of those times where I'm fine going out and getting him because sometimes you actually just have to pay price for what you're getting in fantasy football. You're not always buying low and selling high. The problem with that is that you're not always able to buy players low. And when you do buy players low, it's likely because they just suck. And I don't think that like that thought process just doesn't always work. So sometimes you're going to have that manager in your league that thinks he's outsmarting everyone by selling CEH high and, oh, he's been super efficient. And actually what you're probably just going to get is an RB2 every single week. And I'm perfectly happy with that. Vig, take us to our next guy.
Well, I was just going to say, in a league where it's so hard to get an RB2, like you take away his 5 touchdowns, which is what everyone loves, he is still being used so much. So I love the idea there. I just want folks to focus on what you're saying, which is like, even if he regresses a little bit, he's giving us a safe floor. Speaking of a guy who is not giving us a safe floor, up next is Breece Hall, who finally has had, I don't want to call it his breakout game, but probably his best fantasy game of the season. Touchdown that was nearly fumbled away, but I just really want to see him be more efficient with running the ball. It was always our concern with the timeshare and that offense. How was he going to do? And, Zach Wilson is back. And Zach Wilson, yes, he had a touchdown reception, but man, that game was ugly. And he did not look really good. And like dump offs and checkdowns are really the things that
dude, no, it was so ugly. There is a like a swing pass play where Breece Hall is just sitting there in the flats and Zach Wilson missed him by, I want to say 12 yards. Like it wasn't even close. Like he just looked at it was almost like he was doing a no look where Breece Hall was the decoy and the target was the floor. Because like Zach Wilson, it wasn't anywhere near him. And it's so weird. This guy with this crazy arm talent that like in a pro day can go and throw a 60-yard bomb on the run. It's just like, hey, that guy standing 10 yards away from me, watch me miss him really bad. Like that's what Zach Wilson, it's so stupid.
Yeah, and maybe just coming back and getting back into the swing of things or something weird, but like these are the easiest throws for a quarterback, and it just did not look good. So, and so much of Breece Hall's like work is going to be dependent on Zach Wilson's ability to get him the ball on those passing plays. But speaking about his running, this was the most carries he had on the season. So Breece Hall did pretty well, but coming up for them are 7 pretty tough weeks from a defensive standpoint. Game scripts that are not going to be favoring the Jets in any of them. I don't think are the Jets going to be favored in any of these games. We have the Miami Dolphins, the Green Bay Packers, the Denver Broncos, the Patriots twice, and the Buffalo Bills. Now that second Patriots game is after a bye week, so things could change a little bit. But overall, 7 pretty tough defenses. I am not very excited about Breece Hall. We weren't excited before the season. I'm actually kind of not as excited. He's kind of a sellish high.
Well, like I think you could. Okay, I have been classified as like the Breece Hall hater, and I'm so whatever, man. Like I'm not a hater. So you know what I realized? Breece Hall for me is like Hamilton, like the musical Hamilton with Lin-Manuel Miranda, where it's like everyone loves it so much that I'm just like I had such high expectations for it that when I finally saw it, I was like, all right. It's pretty good. It's okay. But now my wife plays the Hamilton soundtrack like every day for 6 hours straight. And that's like what it's like going on fantasy football Twitter. It's like, well, people won't shut up about Breece Hall and you're seeing it for 6, 7, 8 hours straight to the point that it's like, okay, well, if he's not running for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns every game, I don't want to hear about him anymore. And I think that's where I am mentally. Like I'm just being a hater at this point for the sake of it. So he does have some tough weeks coming up. And I think that it's honestly, it's gonna be weird. Like it's one of those things where it could lend to just him continuing with poor efficiency rushing the ball, or it could all of a sudden turn into more target volume because the Jets are going to be trailing, but then Zach Wilson sucks at throwing the ball to running backs and he just doesn't do it as often. Like all the target volume went down for the running backs. So man, I know this isn't popular, right? And it's just like my opinion with Hamilton. Like it's good, but everyone else seems to be way more hyped about it. And I just think like if you can get something really good in return for Breece Hall, we'll go over some of these examples in a little bit. I'm actually like I'm pretty good with trading him for something good in return because I think that the hype has surpassed what the actual production might be. Like we get this, right? Like he did essentially the same thing as CEH, and we're just like, CEH, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that's just all luck and efficiency. Who cares that he's on the Chiefs? And then Breece Hall goes and does like a very similar thing, and we're like, oh my god, Breece Hall is a god. Vig, like it just, I don't know, man. Like, am I crazy? Am I just a hater?
No, it's okay. It's take lock, and what do the folks on the Ringer podcast call it? Wish casting. People have they have tied their entire reputation to Breece Hall being fantastic. And again, I don't care about the efficiency. You just can't compare the Jets and the Chiefs. One offense is absolutely fantastic, and the other is the Jets. So I just do not understand this. Like I just think people have tied their entire reputation to Breece Hall, and in a way, so have you, Alfredo. But again, our process I think is sound. This is not saying he's not a great talent. It's just I do think the Kyle Pitts situation.
Like I do think he's good. Like I think that Breece Hall is like he's like David Montgomery. He's like Josh Jacobs. He's like a lot of these running backs that are good, not incredible. And I don't know, man. Like I don't know. Let's stop talking about Breece Hall. We've talked about him for like 8 minutes, and I'm annoying myself at this point. Let's get to our next player.
All right, up next, and we'll be quick about this one, is CeeDee Lamb, a guy I like a lot. His weekly target share has really been, pretty decent. 26%, 35%, 39%, 30%. That's like better than decent. 42 targets in 4 games. This would get him at almost 180 targets for the year. And that's with, Cooper Rush throwing him the ball too. But this 179, 180 mark would have been second to only Cooper Kupp last year. So that's just showing you that CeeDee Lamb is getting the volume on a pretty good offense.
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb is one of those guys that I really thought could be like a top 3 receiver this year, and I think I ranked him there. And when Dak Prescott went down, I was like, okay, well, there goes all the accuracy ranking competition stuff, like right out the window. And Cooper Rush has been good. It's I keep saying this phrase, but like it's weird. Like fantasy football has been so weird this year, more weird than ever. And I think that everything now for fantasy football has just been reactionary stuff. And it's like, what happens if Dak Prescott comes back and CeeDee Lamb's production falls off and the Cowboys start losing games? Is Jerry Jones? Do you think Jerry Jones is crazy enough to be like, all right, Cooper Rush, you're our starting quarterback? He already said it once.
Yeah, dude, I think he's crazy enough to not let Dak start. I
think Jerry Jones is crazy enough to do anything he wants. Jerry Jones is crazy enough to pull like a Burt Reynolds in Longest Yard and just like suit up and be like the old man running out there.
Well, I don't know about that, but
Jerry Jones is a crazy person. All right, let's get to a division rival there. Terry McLaurin on the Washington Commanders. Still weird to say. Terry McLaurin has just been not great for fantasy football. His receptions by game 2, 4, 6, 2. Like it's just all even numbers. It's pleasing to the eye, but it's pleasing to the eye, but not so much like your actual fantasy box score.
Oh, was that a Severance macro data refinement reference there?
That's literally the whole point of this segment, Vig.
Okay. Well, we just haven't talked a lot about how it makes you feel. We just haven't said
it. Makes me feel sad. It makes me feel sad. Okay. Oh my gosh. I don't know if you could hear that. My stomach was growling so loud. I have not eaten breakfast yet. That was, almost brought the show to a screeching halt. I would have had to leave and take a DK Metcalf trolley to the kitchen. But yeah, listen, Terry McLaurin, the Commanders, everything that's going on there, they're just way too annoying to start anyone. Like I think Curtis Samuel is the only guy that you could consider starting each week. Terry McLaurin, I guess you can, like as a wide receiver 3. It's just he's been getting less targets than Curtis Samuel. Jahan Dotson's taking away touchdowns, and like all of a sudden now you've got Brian Robinson, who's healthy enough to come back. There was this interesting thing in the Washington Post about Terry McLaurin, where in the first half of games, like the first quarter, second quarter, right before halftime, Terry McLaurin has totaled 3 catches for 24 yards. So it's just all of his production comes in the second half. It's like they go into the locker room and they're like, oh crap, we got to get this guy the ball more. Or it's all in garbage time and they're just losing. And he's got a 15% target share, Vic. Like there's nothing going on with the Commanders offense or Terry McLaurin where I'm just like, I got to keep him. I got to ride this out and I got to see where this goes.
Here's someone I want to go and find. I want to see if someone wants to give me Davante Adams, right? You drafted Davante Adams, expect him to be a top 5 wide receiver, and he hasn't been that, I'll be honest. But he's still quietly been really good, getting 12 targets a game. He's got 3 touchdowns 4 weeks in. He's 1 target off the lead. And at this point, guys you expected, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Chase, are all tied for the target lead. And Davante Adams is just 1 spot behind. People who drafted Davante Adams are really kind of pissed with how he's doing, but he hasn't been bad. And this is a guy that, again, he's the caliber of player who's performing well, maybe not as well as you want. This is the kind of guy you pick up, trade for, acquire now in some sort of trade, and he can win you a championship come, week 14, 15, 16 when you're in the playoffs. So Davante Adams, sneaky sort of trade to try and get.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where like the Raiders, they were 0-3. They finally win a game against the Broncos, and Josh McDaniels just seems like a really bad coach right now. But I think there's also a desperation that it's like, okay, I cannot lose this many games with this many good players. We have to start getting them the ball. And they've been feeding Davante Adams. Like, don't get me wrong, and he's getting the touchdowns. So it's like everything looks good for him. And I think it's like an aura, right? Like it's the same way that like it's the psychology of it where we look at like a CEH and a Breece Hall and like you just start to think a certain way about a player. And I think that's one of those things. Like when you find a trade target in fantasy football, it's that player that everyone is down on, but the numbers look good and the numbers just don't equate to everyone's opinions. And I think that right now that one of those guys is Davante Adams. So it's going to be league dependent. There's going to be some guys like, no, man, that was my first round pick or that was my early second round pick and they're not going to trade him. But I think that there is a way that you can get your hands on Davante Adams in your fantasy leagues. Now, the guy that replaced Davante Adams over in Green Bay, Romeo Doubs. Romeo Doubs is, I mean, like he is the epitome of wish casting, right? Like where we all wanted him to be Davante Adams. And then it looks like he's actually doing that. He's got back-to-back games with 8 targets and a touchdown, 25% target share, most routes run. He's doing all of this in an Aaron Rodgers-led offense, and he played nearly every snap this past week. And Vig, I don't know if you saw this, but on his touchdown catch, okay, this was the most Davante Adams lookalike thing that we have seen all year from a Packers receiver. And the play where he scores is actually, it's that back shoulder fade that Aaron Rodgers loved to throw to Davante Adams. And it's just like, that's how Aaron Rodgers succeeds, is having those timing throws, being able to just put the ball in an area and be like, all right, Dobbs, go get it. Be able to reach out for it. I'm going to put this in a spot where the corner's not going to be able to see it. And there's a connection growing. Like, there's a legit connection. I almost worry that I think everyone is seeing that, and everyone is too excited about Romeo Doubs, because like rookies already get a lot of love. Vig, are you trying to buy, sell, or hold on Romeo Doubs?
This is tough to say. I'm trying to do both. If I can get him, I will.
Well,
try
I gave
to
you
get
3
him at a
options.
reasonable value. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, if I have him, I'm holding. If I can get him somewhere, I will. I just don't think anyone's going to sell. But he's, again, someone I could really package into a deal to buy myself into like a Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, like a true league winner. I don't think Romeo Doubs is like winning me a league at the moment. So he's actually someone, I would love to like package him as a part of something else to try to get me one of those absolute elite talents.
But I think he could actually. I'm not going to lie. Like, I do think he could. I think a lot of people were, because you think about how you got him in the first place. Like, a lot of people drafted him very late or picked him up off waivers. And that's what we all kind of expected from Allen Lazard. And a wide receiver 1 in an Aaron Rodgers offense it's just exciting. And you look at their opponents in the division, Minnesota, Detroit, like these teams are letting up a lot of fantasy points to wide receivers. So I think I like him a little bit more than you. But all right, let's get to our final segment here. We're going to be talking about our favorite trade targets. Like, these are the guys that we're going a little bit more above and beyond for these players. And I think that there's some pretty helpful tips here. Okay. Something that I personally like to do, and I think everyone wants to do this all the time when they're doing a trade, because like that's how every trade gets offered to me, is package 2 for 1s. Like, here's two like mediocre things for one good thing, right? Like, it's like the kid at the lunch table. It's like, here, do you want my sandwich and my apple for your chocolate pudding? And the other kid's like, no, chocolate pudding's awesome. Like, that's what ends up happening in all these fantasy leagues. So I think I'm good always with doing the 2 for 1, but I think you can't be afraid of getting that in return. Is that something like, does that turn you off, Vig? Like when someone's trying to send you a trade?
No, it really depends on what my team needs. But yeah, sometimes a 2 for 1, there are trades where both sides get better. I feel like we're accustomed to think that we have to win every single trade, but both people can win a trade. And there are 2 for 1 deals I have made that have won me championships where I gave up that elite talent. I had Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill in a league last year, and I traded away Tyreek Hill, and I was sort of castrated for it. And I won because of the other players I got in that deal. So again, I think it really depends. We have to think about it, and it could be something that could help you.
Yeah, there's just like a weird thing where we all say like, who wins this trade, right? Or who got the better of the deal? I'm fine losing a trade. Like, I'm fine losing a trade if it means that I'm going to have the better outcome in the long run. And I think that's why you do it, right? Like, you don't do a trade to win a week. You don't do a trade to, I think that everyone has a different view of how they're doing it. But like, for example, I made a trade recently for one of the players we're going to talk about, and you and a couple other people said like, nah, man, you lost that trade. And now here we are a couple weeks later, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. So let's get into our favorite trade targets, and enough with all the ambiguous talk. Vig, tell us the first trade target that you're looking to acquire.
I want Jamar Chase anywhere and everywhere I can get Jamar Chase. And yes, it sounds crazy. Everybody wants Jamar Chase, but we're going to give you some real life Twitter data to show you what the public is thinking. So Jamar Chase tied for the most targets in the NFL. 8 of the next 10 to 11 games they're playing are against teams that are in the bottom 1/3 of the defense. We know Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow look great that week 17. So if you are going to make it to the championship week of your fantasy football season, it is going to be an absolute high scoring shootout against the Buffalo Bills. Like, we're talking Jamar Chase has like 25 plus point PPR point potentials there. And he just had 25 PPR points against the Dolphins, and people are still seeing like, oh, Jamar Chase, so many people are saying he's kind of a disappointment. So just to give you some context, Alfredo did a lot of Twitter polls this past week. So you may know some of this already if you follow him or see it. If you don't, you should follow him. But 52% said they would rather have Derrick Henry over Jamar Chase, and in a trade for Jamar Chase would take the Derrick Henry side. Another almost 50% said they would prefer Aaron Jones. It was 49%, but 50% said they would prefer Aaron Jones. More than 40% said they would prefer having Curtis Samuel and Breece Hall over Jamar Chase, and almost
the legend
40%,
of Breece Hall.
Yeah, it's crazy. And 40% said they would rather have Hollywood Brown and Cordero Patterson than Jamar Chase. So look at this. The reason we're bringing this up to you is if you have Curtis Samuel, Breece Hall, and you like them, they're doing well, trade them. You might not even know this, but consider asking for Jamar Chase for those two guys, and you might actually get him. And so it's just, there is a lot of potential to like try to get Jamar Chase on your roster, even though you might not think that's possible, at least according to what the public is saying and doing. So
like the fact that 1 in 3 people are like, yeah, I'd take Cordero Patterson and Marquise Brown over Jamar Chase.
More than 1 in 3. So
like it just tells you how so like when people say, oh, my league would never do that, it looks like some are, and I just like, I don't get it. Let's move along here to our next favorite trade to make, and this is one where I kind of go opposite direction. Instead of doing the like I trade 2 for 1, is like I'm actually happy getting these guys, so you can trade away some of maybe those disappointing bigger names like an Ezekiel Elliott, right, or something like that, and or James Conner or whatever. And I think you can package this for a Devin Singletary and one of these rookie wide receivers, either George Pickens or Jameson Williams. I'm gonna get into each of these players and like talk about like why I like them. But Devin Singletary, he played 87% of his team's snaps on Sunday. He was lower than 60% in weeks 1 and 2, but it's been going up, his snap share percentage. He's been at 73 and 87% over the last 2 games. His running back finishes by week, first 2 weeks, not great. Last 2 weeks, 4th and 19th. We're starting to see that the Bills simply don't want to use Zach Moss. They don't trust James Cook. Devin Singletary is out there getting the running work and the receiving work. He had a 16% target share and 100% of the work when it came to the 2-minute drill for the Bills. And this was in a competitive game against the Ravens. All right. Just to give even more context to the snaps and the usage, Singletary had 55 snaps to the next best running back on the team, which was Zach Moss at 6. Okay. Devin Singletary owns this backfield, and I want a running back in a really good offense. And I think the question was never like, is he talented or what? It's will he get used? And we're seeing that he is. Now, some of the other guys I mentioned, these rookie wide receivers, George Pickens, he has seen his target share, another guy who's trending upward. He's seen his target share rise from 8% to 9% to 22% to 32% this past week. Kenny Pickett is now the starting quarterback over there in Pittsburgh, even though Mike Tomlin's trying to play coy. Don't be bashful, Mike Tomlin. We know you want Kenny Pickett to start. Just do it, man. Like, he's not stupid. He won't do that. But Kenny Pickett seems willing to take the shots downfield, Vig. Utilize the middle of the field. Have you ever seen like the heat map of like where Mitchell Trubisky was showing? Yeah. Like it was a straight, like it was a U. That's what it was. Like he was only throwing behind the line of scrimmage and off to the sidelines. And George Pickens was never getting utilized. And now all of a sudden, George Pickens comes out of this game with, I believe it was over 100 yards or nearly 100 yards receiving with Kenny Pickett. I can see where there's the trend where this is going to go well. And I think that this is one of those times where I'm happy to do the 1 for 2 deal, because I'm going to get a good starting running back and then potentially one of those league winning rookie wide receivers and we've seen it where rookie wide receivers really change the whole plane of fantasy football. The other one I'm going to talk about here is Jameson Williams. And I've talked a lot about Jameson Williams in the offseason, but this is more so about the Lions. The Lions offense has been really, really good. Jared Goff has been really good, regardless of who's on the field. There was no DJ Chark this week, no Amon-Ra St. Brown, no DeAndre Swift, and Jared Goff was one of the best quarterbacks in fantasy football this week. Okay, Goff has his highest intended air yards per attempt of his career and the highest yards after catch per completion of his career. That simply means, to put like all the fancy jargon into just common sense, he's throwing the ball further downfield than he ever has, and he's setting up players to run after. So what happens when you get a weapon like Jameson Williams that is potentially one of the top 2 or 3 fastest players in the league? I can see this being a huge explosion, kind of like how we ended up seeing Odell Beckham come into the league after missing a whole bunch of time and come in and just carry a bunch of people to fantasy football championships that year that he rejoined the Giants and Eli Manning. I don't want to get way too ahead of myself, and I kind of am already, but this is one of those where I'm happy taking that risk. Okay, the Lions lead the league in points per game. DJ Chark has not been the guy that they want him to be, and I think Jameson Williams can fit easily into that spot. Some players that you can trade for him that people prefer, Zeke Elliott. There's just so much name value. It's still there. James Conner, so much name value that's there. Rashad Penny, name value that's there. People love running backs. And these are all running backs that have been disappointing or losing work, Rashad Penny just had a great game. So I would be happy to trade away a Rashad Penny to get Devin Singletary and Jameson Williams, or Devin Singletary and George Pickens.
Yeah, and I just want to really quickly throw in those percentages. I know you said people would be happy to trade, but they really are. I mean, 61% of the people preferred Ezekiel Elliott, 59%, almost the same amount, preferred James Conner, and 53. So again, more than 1 in 2 people preferred Rashad Penny, which is just bonkers to me. But again, all of you who think, oh, this would never fly in my, in my league,
It does.
It really, really could. And you won't know until you make an offer. So you got to make these offers, because making them now in week 4 is how you can win the playoffs, how you win your league. So up next, though, is J.K. Dobbins. As we said, we thought he was going to kind of not do very well. If you listen to our shows, we said first few weeks he'll be eased in, but like look to him around week 4, week 5. So I'll pat myself on the back for that one. And you're back too, Alfredo. But he got his first receiving touchdown of his career. Justice Hill did have 36% of the RB snaps, and we'll talk about his injury, or we already talked about his injury. So that really leaves Mike Davis, and we don't need to talk too much about Mike Davis, but J.K. Dobbins really might give you this Clyde Edwards-Helaire type value, because the Ravens are always going to be in a position to score. J.K. Dobbins is going to be in a position to score touchdowns. Last year from weeks 5 through 17, Devontae Freeman was the RB17 with just a 50% snap share, which is where J.K. Dobbins already is, and the way trends are looking, it looks like, he's going to be utilized a bit more, and he looked good playing too.
Yeah.
It's not just
he
actually he looks good. He's taking hits well. His contact balance is great. His vision, he was hitting little seams and waiting. He was patient. J.K. Dobbins looks good, and he is still in a run heavy, high powered offense. So, he's doing pretty darn well. And here's sort of some of the trades out there. 51% said they would prefer Marquise Brown in a trade over J.K. Dobbins.
Marquise Brown is like the perfect trade away person right now.
Oh my
He's
gosh,
the perfect
absolutely.
trade away candidate, because once DeAndre Hopkins comes back, and that whole Cardinals offense is just like a time bomb waiting to explode. And I understand like Marquise Brown has had such great target share, target volume, receptions, yards, all of it. It's something's going to give at some point.
DeAndre Hopkins, that's what's going to give.
Something is DeAndre Hopkins. It's D-Hop coming back.
Yeah, you cannot forget how good D-Hop is. I mean, I'll just say this as an aside. Some leagues still have D-Hop available on waivers. Pick him up now. Stash him away if you can. It's kind of crazy that he's available. Not a ton of leagues, like 10 to 15% of leagues. But other players that you could potentially consider trading. Garrett Wilson. 42% of folks said that they would prefer Garrett Wilson over J.K. Dobbins. And another 35% are still like in love with Cam Akers as a prospect and his ability. So you never know. Just what's the worst that could happen? You offer the trade and you get shut down. But yeah, honestly, this is a trade I am willing to make. But take us to our next player, Alfredo.
When you said what's the worst that could happen, you sounded like every guy friend that's like, go talk to that girl, man. What's the worst that could happen? She shoots you down. It's like, yeah, and then I'm emotionally scarred for years. That's the worst that could happen.
That could. Now, if you take your fantasy football that seriously, that being shot down from a trade affects you that much, then maybe we got different things to talk about.
I have a very fragile psyche. All right, let's get to our last player here, and it's Chris Olave, wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints. And I'm going to use this analogy here. Chris Olave is a PlayStation 5. Like, he is just like this new, sexy, shiny toy that if you have one, you are likely keeping it, and everyone else that wants it cannot find it anywhere, cannot get it. And I'm the idiot that I drafted Chris Olave in one of my leagues, and I dropped him after week 1 because I'm stupid. And I was like, well, Cole Kmet has been really bad. I need a tight end. So here's Gerald Everett to go play with my quarterback, Justin Herbert. And so now I'm here with Gerald Everett as my tight end and no Chris Olave, who got picked up. And Chris Olave has been fantastic. And this is something I think could put his whole season into perspective. Jacob Gibbs, who does great work over for CBS and Sportsline, he has a tweet. He said, over the last 8 years, the wide receiver that led the league in air yards, which Chris Olave does, after the first 3 weeks, which he did, finished as a top 9 fantasy wide receiver in 4 out of those 8 years. So half of the time, the player who led the league in air yards ended up being a top 9 fantasy wide receiver. And maybe that's a little bit of like that wish casting word that we talk about. But Chris Olave really, really has a path, an avenue where that could happen, especially if there's no healthy Michael Thomas, especially with Jarvis Landry being like, I don't know, 56 years old, right? he's already leading the Saints in targets and receiving yards for the last 3 straight games. Like, there is an absolute passing of the baton here. Or passing of the torch, whatever, item you want to pass. But Chris Olave is the new wide receiver 1 there. And it didn't even matter that they switched over to Andy Dalton. So I understand he's kind of like a PlayStation 5. It's going to be really tough to get your hands on him, but I'm willing to pay up for Chris Olave. Also, he's Cuban. And I'm Cuban. And now, like, I just want to sit on South Beach and eat croquetas with him and play some dominoes and, like, wear a cool guayabera and maybe, like, a little hat tilted to the side. You think, can I pull off that look?
I don't know if you can pull off that look, but I'm just going to say he's a Buckeye, and I, work for and teach at the Ohio State University, so I'm also a Buckeye, and that I actually don't know where I'm going.
So what do you want?
A Buckeye's a nut.
A Buckeye's a nut? They make nut butter from it. How do you feel about that? That's what you and Chris Olave are going to do. You're going to sit in Ohio, cold, ugly Ohio, eating nut butter. That's what you get. Chris Olave is honestly, he's a fantastic player to trade for right now. And you look at the fantasy playoffs for him, and it's looking a little too far ahead, but he's got the Falcons, the Browns, and the Eagles. Okay. Falcons, bad secondary. Browns, that defense has no
secondary.
Good. Yeah. And then the Eagles, listen, I know that Darius Slay has been there and the secondary has been actually decent, but this is one of those games where it could be a shootout for him. And Jameis Winston has no problem. He says, shootout. Ha, I'm there.
I'm in.
Right? Yeah. Right. And so, like, Chris Olave could actually have a really, really big impact for a lot of fantasy managers. And we did the polls on Twitter once again, and this is what it costs to get a PS5 out there, folks. Okay, Ramondre Stevenson and Amari Cooper, 41% sided with getting Ramondre and Amari Cooper. That's another guy like in the Breece Hall vein, Ramondre Stevenson, that everyone's just like, yes, he is going to become the guy. Okay, well, I would gladly trade away Ramondre and Amari Cooper for Chris Olave because I think the ceiling is so much higher for a guy like Olave. Another couple of players here, Garrett Wilson and Cam Akers, 38% said they would rather have Wilson and Akers over Olave. And I think that's a lot of that is that hangover from Garrett Wilson being such a good wide receiver the first couple weeks with Joe Flacco. And I'm just still super worried about how poopy Zach Wilson is. And this last one here seemed like the most likely trade to actually get done, where you can, perceived sell low on some players, Terry McLaurin and James Conner. And this is where someone in your league thinks that they are buying low on veterans that can be easy starters for them, and they're selling high on a Chris Olave. And I just you take a look at their schedules throughout the rest of the season, take a look at the avenue for production. Chris Olave is a guy that I am willing to push the chips in for, or the dominoes for, because I think that he's going to be one of those players that is going to absolutely help you win fantasy football championships this year. That'll do it for us. Vig, we almost hit the 50-minute mark, but every Monday, wherever you get your podcast, come listen to us. You can listen to us on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, wherever, and follow us here on YouTube. Subscribe, click that bell, make sure to like and comment below. We'll get back to you on all of those questions. Hope all of you have a great week. For Dr. Vig and myself, adios.